post API setup. And if you notice, here is the same payload that I'm using. I have a script tab now, which is a little different. I have this two line of code where I'm making sure the status code when I run the API should be 200. That's one of my test case. Another thing I did is here I'm parsing the response that I receive into this variable JSON data. Then in the first line, here I'm saying that create an environment variable for the ID, the driver ID that I would get after the successful creation of driver. I would create that as a variable. And then same thing, the response I receive, I am also storing the first name into the variable as well. I also have a driver last name received, driver email, and phone number. So I'm storing some of the response values inside the environment variable. So if I hit send, successfully created. And if I go to the environment, I can see that it created this driver underscore first name and whatever the value we received. It also created this driver ID, and now we have some values stored that we received from the response when we created the driver. Now if I go to the driver get API, I provided the driver ID in the URL. This ID should be the same ID that we just got from the driver creation API. So I have the driver API. Now for this driver ID, I have two test cases. One test case is the response of course should be 200. The second test case says that get the response that you receive, then compare the response with the driver first name variable. So this way I'm making sure that when I created an API, I store the variable first name. Then when I fetch that driver ID using the get API, I'm comparing the data I received versus the data I used to create the driver. So this way I'm doing a kind of end-to-end validation. I'm not manipulating in between. Whatever I use to create, I should also receive the same way. So I have one test case here where I'm using the first name. We can similarly create another one for the last name by changing these variable names, and then we can keep creating our test cases like that inside the get API. So that's how we can validate some of the information we received and automate the whole process. We can add this test case into our other APIs that I have, like vehicle. So we can create a new vehicle and then stored the values into the environment variables and then use them to validate, just like I did here.